How many times have you heard the phrase, age is just a number? We're always told that there are no limitations on the road to success, to wealth, or happiness. Just imagine how many people have been inspired by a simple encouragement of, you can achieve your dreams at any age, it's never too late. The truth is, as much as we would want for that to be the case, we often tend to idealize the amount of control we have in our own lives, and as such, age is often not quite just a number. The idea of ageism, according to the World Health Organization, refers to the prejudice and discrimination towards others on the basis of age. Typically used to describe embedded stereotypes surrounding older generations, ageism is most prominently cited when society fails to respond appropriately to the needs of such populations. Whether it might be in the fields of healthcare, housing, services and facilities, or just any type of social discrimination, ageism is definitely a notable issue as it applies to older generations. However, with the emphasis that we often place on ageism directed at seniors, we tend to fail to consider or even notice its impact on youth. From employment to societal participation and social protection, the idea that youth are immature, inexperienced, and unknowledgeable has propelled reverse ageism as one of the strongest concealed obstacles that youth face. Today, I'd like to discuss the impacts of ageism and how they reach beyond older generations, from service to employment and advocacy. When I was 15 years old, I founded my own medical nonprofit dedicated to donating funds and resources to hospitals and hospital patients, called SMART, which stands for Students for Medical Aid, Relief, and Treatment. Being born and growing up in developing areas of China, I was very aware of the unequal access to healthcare that varying populations had, as well as the inconsistent quality of medical facilities. All throughout childhood, I'd been very passionate about public health and dreamt of a world in which everyone was able to receive the care that they deserved, which delighted my parents until I told them I didn't want to become a doctor. Instead, when I realized that I could start a medical nonprofit as a teenager, I was elated. In a world where you don't really have that much power until you reach adulthood, this, in my mind, was my opportunity to take a step towards the future that I wanted to see. So, with a couple of friends, I decided to grasp onto that opportunity. Living in Houston, such a diverse melting pot of cultures, it felt like being able to donate funds and resources to hospitals and bring joy to hospital patients was like taking yet another step towards healthcare equality. However, along with the natural challenges accompanying an organization's launch, our ages were, in and of itself, a huge barrier for us to overcome. For starters, we were unable to start a bank account, and while this isn't necessarily the product of any discriminatory behavior so much as it was because, well, I was 15 years old, it was challenging all the same. Can you imagine trying to position yourself as a nonprofit dedicated to donating funds and resources and not even being able to manage your own? It's kind of hard to appear legitimate as an organization when you are literally unable to fulfill your main cause. But beyond those fundamental barriers, there was a lot more that our ages were affecting. Our first event was, in the interest that we didn't have a bank account, called Smart Talks, where we wanted to fundraise for COVID-19 relief efforts in Yemen through Instagram Live for UNICEF. It was a series of interviews that we conducted with medical professionals and medical students about everything ranging from their education and advice they had for others who were interested in the field to problems that they wanted to bring awareness to, issues like mental health, ableism, racism, etc. As our first ever event as an organization, we wanted to create something that would not only establish ourselves in the community, but also bring resources to those in need in our trying time and contribute monetarily to pandemic relief efforts, even if we were not going to be the ones handling the funds directly. Thankfully, we received responses from tens of medical professionals, all willing to help or contribute in some way. And even those who were unable to speak because of scheduling conflicts or other commitment issues expressed their apologies and declined politely. However, out of those who declined, a couple of people cited our ages as a reason to deny our legitimacy. When we introduced ourselves as a student-led organization, we received responses along the lines of, "I appreciate your mission, but I only work with professionals." And a couple of people just stopped responding altogether after previously agreeing to speak. It didn't just end there, as even within everyday conversations, mentioning SMART would inevitably lead to responses around the lines of, "What can you guys even do?" Tons of comments doubting our ability to fulfill our mission simply because we are not adults. And while there are many other examples, the point remains the same. Innately, we've been so dispositioned as a society to immediately trust adults and be wary of youth. The belief that youth are inexperienced and immature has snowballed into a huge barrier in terms of societal participation. Through my time working with SMART, I've experienced firsthand just how damaging this kind of mindset can be, and hope that other youth can learn to recognize and overcome it before it affects them in the same way. But beyond those service-driven endeavors like what I worked with SMART, there's a myriad of other ways that ageism affects youth. For starters, in terms of employment, corporate structures have always been organized more or less in terms of age, the oldest and most experienced at the top and trickling down younger employees at the bottom. Of course, it is organized as such so that ideally, younger employees are able to learn and gain experience from their more experienced counterparts. Of course, this definitely makes sense. But when we start to realize that the seniority of the employees are becoming a justification for their status, instead of their true knowledge and experience, we start to run into a problem. The rise of the idea that young people are expected to do anything it takes to get a step in the corporate ladder, a belief that is used to justify unfair norms like lower youth minimum wages, longer expected working hours, and the rise of low-quality unpaid internships. Even in terms of entrepreneurship, often referred to as a young man's game, being young can be a huge obstacle to overcome. Being known as inexperienced is often an immediate means for rejection, which also discourages other young people from attempting their own initiatives. According to a 2021 Guidant Financial study, about 86% of entrepreneurs were between the ages of 41 and 75, while only about 14% were younger than that. Isn't it a bit ironic then how often entrepreneurship is known to be so youth-centered when the statistics are so opposingly skewed? Even in terms of social protection, some countries in the EU place age restrictions on when youth are able to receive unemployment benefits or income support. And historically, longer periods of unemployment in one's youth tend to lead to lower average life earnings in their future. All of these factors contribute into a larger social issue. Youth who are struggling to find jobs because of age biases may be seen as less reliable in the housing market, even struggling to rent out shelter. And continued discrimination in the workplace may lead to the exacerbation of these unfair policies and expectations for youth, not to mention stunting a young person's future growth. For students especially, service and activism has been always a key force in encouraging societal participation at a young age. It's a great way for young people to learn about inequalities in the world and how they might be able to contribute, and encourages them to continue these types of endeavors well into their adulthood. However, it seems that nowadays, even service and activism is starting to have age restrictions. Many young activists like Greta Thunberg have been belittled because of their ages compared to their elder counterparts. And even student-led protests are often seen as immature actions by misbehaving kids rather than a rejection of unfair societal norms. These continued denial of the legitimacy of youth altogether prevents youth from having a hand in the world that they will one day lead. So, with how often we see the impacts of ageism, not only in the short term, but also in the long term, it's clear that it doesn't just affect young people on an individual basis, but rather extends to the core structure of society itself. With a problem so deeply ingrained into our lives, how can we alleviate the presence of ageism? Support youth. With how often age is often emphasized to be a justification for denying young people's endeavors and discouraging them from participating in society, it's even more important for us to use education in one's primitive years. Teachers, parents, counselors, any type of adult figure is thus so critical in helping a student or a young person feel empowered to reach out to those job opportunities and reach out to spearhead their own initiatives. We may not be able to control how society discriminates on the basis of age, but we are able to control how young people may respond to it. And as youth, it's important for us to step up and chase our dreams unabashedly and unapologetically. We've all heard of the isms, right? We have racism, sexism, ableism, classism, etc. And if you're anything like me, you tend to hear the suffix ism and go, ooh, yeah, that can't be good either, even if you don't really know what it means. And yes, I know that altruism ends in ism as well, but you get the idea. The point is, with how many of these very, very prominent social issues we're seeing in our lives every single day, ageism often gets swept under the rug, and it shouldn't be. Stereotypes and prejudice may take away so many people's opportunities, so it's even more important for us to take every opportunity that we get, and if we don't get any, to create our own. You might never be completely in control of your own life, and age may always seem to be more than just a number, but you are in control of how proactive you are in pursuing your future. This way, we just might be one step closer to turning age into just a number. Thank you.